Hey, it's Chad here, and welcome back into another episode of A Level Deeper. I want to first take a moment and just recognize and celebrate the fact that you are here. I mean, this show is called A Level Deeper. The whole premise of the show is that we're going to go deeper into this human experience. We're going to have deep conversation. I applaud you for showing up and joining me in a conversation like this because sometimes it can be uncomfortable. Sometimes it can bring up new or challenging thoughts, and sometimes it can change our perspective. I think that's important. I think by you being here and listening to this conversation, you're saying that's important as well. I think that's awesome. My friend and recurring guest, Nate Langley, and I will often talk about this idea of the thing beneath the thing. There's something that we see or talk about or hear about on the surface level, and there's typically something beneath that. And that was true in this conversation that I had with my guest today, whose name is Rebecca Berg. The things that you're going to hear us talk about in this conversation are things like tattoos and jobs, food, entrepreneurship. Maybe those are things that you're interested in or you're drawn to. Maybe not. But I encourage you to stick around because there's a lot of things beneath those things. Beneath all of that are topics and ideas that we explore in this conversation around autonomy and deciding things for yourself, embracing judgment or embracing this idea of letting people down, exploring and understanding our relationship to food and when a relationship to food might become unhealthy in some ways. And a thing like the idea of unlearning and how that can be an important process for us to become the type of people that we want to become and do the sorts of things that we want to do in the world. So as you're listening to this conversation, just keep an eye on or keep your mind on this idea of the thing beneath the thing and think about some of the themes and topics that are really being talked about here when we explore what's beyond surface level, when we go, you might say, a level deeper into some of these topics. Okay, without further ado, here is my conversation with Rebecca Berg. Hope you enjoy.
It's all good. Got a fresh cup of tea ready to go.
Oh, there you go. Excellent. Well, folks, to the listener, I don't know, Rebecca and I have been going through a myriad of technical difficulties. Specifically, actually, me. I've been going through a lot of technical difficulties. Rebecca has been patient. I don't know how much of our previous, what we've recorded to this point, was actually recorded. So let's go back to the beginning. And you have a tattoo that has 3 letters on it. Talk us through what those 3 letters are and what that tattoo means for you.
Yes. So last year I got a tattoo. It's 3 letters in a Times New Roman-like font. Use your voice. UYV is what I have, and that's what it stands for. Use your voice. The reason why I got that was because I've been working with my therapist for a long while, and she was talking about being able to speak my truth. And when she said, use your voice, I just thought I have to have that with me all the time. And I've been wanting to get a tattoo for a while, but I knew that I didn't just want something random. And there was nothing that resonated deeply enough with me until I heard her say those words. And I just thought that's what I want on my body. And it serves as a reminder for me to speak up and to honor my inner voice, and that, I'm worth, it's worth it to share the hard things.
Okay. So this is a slight detour, but just because I'm curious, how does it feel having this tattoo now? It's something I've considered in my life. I've considered getting one. If I were to get a tattoo, I'd want it to be something that is meaningful. I've really struggled with the permanence of it. Mm-hmm. How does it feel having it?
Yeah, I struggled with the permanence of it too for a long time. And also with the stigma that I felt that tattoos had as being for a certain type of person. I'm not even sure what type of person that is, but I just felt like that's not me. Like you don't alter your body permanently. And in Judaism, it's also a little bit taboo. And so I would say a year plus later, I am so, so happy that I have it. I don't regret it at all. I feel like it's very honoring for me, and it was very empowering for me. And after I got that one, I ended up getting another one, and it just kind of let me reclaim my autonomy over my own body, and I have no regrets.
That's awesome. Okay, well, maybe this gives me a little bit more courage to think about it.
Yeah, you just went skydiving, so I'm sure you can handle a couple minutes of discomfort.
But I think I have a lot of those same sort of internal dialogues about like, this isn't me, or this isn't what, I don't know, my family is a very clean cut family, and I think I would be the first person in my family to get a tattoo. And it's, I've kind of joke, but like my grandma will say, I don't know about this whole tattoo thing. I don't think anyone should get one. And so, but it sounds like, you had some of those things as well. So you had to overcome, like, this wasn't really a small decision. Yes, it's a relatively small tattoo on your body, but it wasn't a small decision. So what ultimately made you say, you know what, I'm going to do this, even though it might be looked at as a certain way from a faith perspective or from a family perspective? What made you say, you know what, this is important to me and I'm going to do it?
I think it's been a long journey to realize that my life is my own life, and I have to make decisions that feel okay for me. And I'm still working through it. I'm still working through disappointing other people. I think my parents were, I don't know, I don't want to say not happy, but they certainly didn't ask a lot of questions. They were just like, huh. Okay. So it was, I knew it wasn't going to be a popular decision. But I think it was just so important to me to have these reminders with me. And, it's my body. And for growing up, I think, and being a woman, I think there are just a lot of expectation placed on our bodies for not only how we dress, but what our purpose is in life. And, after I got the first one, I just thought, like, this doesn't change anything about who I am. Like, yes, it's important to me and it was very meaningful to me, but at the end of the day, the other one that I have is very fun and playful and doesn't really have any meaning. It's supposed to just represent, not taking life too seriously, really. It's just for fun. And so when people ask me what the other one means, it's just like, I call it my arm party. It's just for fun. Like life doesn't have to be so serious. So I try to remember that, I got 2 tattoos, yes, but I can still hide them if I want to. And gosh, other people don't like it. It was like taking the first step to do something and live with it and not be liked. If that makes sense.
How does that feel to know that you've made a decision and people may not like you for it? How does that sit with you?
It's very challenging to confront not being liked or disappointing other people. It's a very uncomfortable feeling. I don't like it. I think in the past I would have rather just people pleased my way through it. But at some point, the people who I'm so, was so honoring and thinking about, some of them aren't even alive anymore. But I am here. So I feel like for these types of choices, you reach a point where you have to decide which discomfort you want to choose.
I can really resonate with that. I've made what I would refer to as some sort of head scratching decisions in my life, like leaving a great corporate job and moving back to my mom's basement, like leaving another good corporate job and moving into a van. And I've felt some of that, whether it was actually happening or whether it was some of the stories that I was creating about how I thought people perceived me. I can really resonate with, it is hard. It is really hard to feel like people that are close to you or people that you care about are in some way not approving of decisions that you're making with your life. It's a really difficult feeling to sit with. I've spent many years and also many therapy sessions trying to uncover and figure out what this means. And I resonate with, and I'm curious about this. You talked about this long journey that you've been on of self-belief and making decisions for yourself. Tell me more about that. I guess that would lead me to believe that there's got to be chapters in your life where maybe you weren't making decisions for yourself, or you weren't making the decisions that you wanted to make. Is that what led you to now go down this path of figuring out, well, what is it that I want, and how am I going to make decisions for myself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the fear of disappointing other people or causing hurt to other people or making them feel sad or upset or anything really drove me to want to keep the peace and avoid conflict and to do things that I felt like I had to do or I should do, even if my body was deeply uncomfortable with it. And I guess I talk about that journey of self-belief because that's been like my focus over the past couple years, especially in therapy. I mean, most of my homework is just asking myself what I want and what I need, as opposed to, well, I would like this, but then that other person's going to be upset, or, this person's, that might be uncomfortable for that person to hear. And then I don't know if I want to do that. I can just do what they want, that kind of thing. And it started off with, yes, there have been many chapters. So I'm like, where do I start with this? But I would say I was in a very difficult job for 3 years, working at a group private practice in nutrition counseling. And eventually it just like you referenced in other podcasts, it became too painful for me to continue to work there. Even though I would say well, why am I unhappy? I should be happy. I have, I'm a supervisor. I see all these clients, I'm on the path to get this credential or whatever. But I would come home and just be like, something's wrong. And when I left, I deeply disappointed my supervisor, or at least I think I did. I'm not sure because she didn't say very many words. But that was really hard because I felt like that was someone that I was going to have, I hoped I would have a long-term relationship with, a supportive mentorship type of relationship. And when I decided to leave that job, it was clear that that was not going to happen. And that was very painful. But I think what it's allowed me to do in leaving that full-time job and starting my own business is have more space and time to sit with myself and literally think and reflect. What do I need? What do I want? No one's forcing me to have this business. And sometimes when I get in that mentality, I just think, whoa, we need to slow down. We need to stop, because you don't have to do any of this. You're choosing to do this.
I was just recently recording a conversation and we were talking about this idea of things that we have to do versus get to do. And I often label all of these things as all these things that I have to do. And yet I, like you, am a business owner. I choose the clients that I work with. I choose all my projects. I choose to do this podcast. And so my wife, Eileen, she will talk about the things that I get to do often. She always writes get to-do list. That's always at the top. Mine's always, to do. And I have to do, I need to do. So that is an interesting change in mindset. And I think an important one as well. Okay. I'm curious about this. You're talking about this feeling of pain that you had in this job. Can you describe for us a little bit more of what did that feel like? What felt off or wrong to you? I'm thinking about the person listening to this conversation, and I've felt that at times in my life with a certain job in particular. And I'm imagining someone listening maybe feels some kind of, something just about what I'm doing feels off. Can you walk us through what that felt like for you?
Mm-hmm. I think it's important to have context around it. I don't know I don't think you gave an introduction. So, I'm a registered dietitian in private practice. And so I do nutrition counseling sessions, and I specialize in eating disorders and mental health. So feeling bad for me was waking up in the morning and not wanting to go to work, not wanting to see my clients, feeling excited when they canceled or didn't show up, and feeling just resentful that I had to have so many meetings in a day. And it was very ethically and morally, it felt wrong to me to be in the position of helping and healing, while also feeling deeply tired and not being able to take care of myself, not being able to nourish myself in the way that I wanted to, or move my body. I wasn't always sleeping well. And I didn't think that was fair for them, because I believe that in my role, what people deserve is for me to show up grounded and engaged and looking forward to sitting with them and holding space for them. And it was just an awful feeling, just not wanting to get out of bed. I mean, I think it got pretty bad near the end there. And then also feeling like, for the amount of work that I was putting in, that my boss didn't recognize that and didn't treat me the way I felt that I deserved to be treated. So yeah, there was a lot of different factors, but I think it took me it wasn't like I was only feeling that for a couple of months. It was a slow build up to it feeling that bad, to the point where I knew at that point I needed to walk away. But I don't want to make it sound like it was easy, because it was not. And there were, many a therapy session spent. So, like my person literally reminding me, like, you are not trapped in this job. Like, you can leave at any time. And many months of feeling like, no, I can't leave, but it takes a while to integrate.
I feel that. I think we can easily get sucked into that mindset. Like, we do have to do X. It could be a job, it could be a role, it could be a responsibility, and it's a trapping mindset. So before we talk about, okay, you left this role and then you had the opportunity to think about what you wanted to create, let's walk back in the story a little bit. What was it that led you to pursue the route of becoming a registered dietitian in the first place? What took you down this path? I know what's probably happening right now. You just heard the ad music play. You're starting to tune out exactly what I'm saying, so you can skip this ad and get back to the conversation, and I'm going to encourage you not to. Because if you continue to skip this ad in order to get back to the conversation, then at some point there may not be a conversation for you to get back to. Okay, now that I have your attention, that might have been a little bit exaggerated. Likely, I'm not going to stop producing this show, but you can help me make this show a lot more viable, and so I can continue doing this into the future. Fun fact, I don't make any money from this show. In fact, I actually pay in order to create these episodes on a weekly basis. And while that may not exactly seem like your problem or your issue, if you like meaningful conversations like the ones that we have here, well, then it is your problem. I could use your help in the form of financial support specifically in order to keep this show going and continually invest back into creating it. Here's another fun fact. If everyone listening to this episode were to donate the single cost of a cup of coffee, I could probably do this as a full-time job. That is a dream and a vision I have for myself one day, and I want this to be like PBS or NPR, where it's funded by the viewers. I'm imagining a show where we, together, collectively, decide that these meaningful conversations are important to us, and we don't rely on outside help or advertisers in order to keep them coming on a weekly basis. So yes, this is a long-winded way of saying I'm asking you for money. If you're in a place where you feel comfortable doing so, I am asking you to make a small donation to support the show. You can do that by following the link that is in the show notes of this episode to a place called Buy Me a Coffee. Now, by buying me a coffee through this platform, you're not actually buying me a coffee. It's just kind of a mental construct to make this transaction of money a little bit more tangible. Thank you in advance for considering supporting me, supporting the show, and for supporting meaningful conversations like the one we're about to get back to right now.
Yeah. The short answer is my own personal journey with disordered eating. When I graduated college, I moved to New York City and I started working in nonprofit event planning and marketing. That was my dream, to be a nonprofit event planner. And I didn't have a lot of friends. And one of my coworkers was like, "Hey, do you want to join the gym?" I said, "Sure." I was not a gym person. I wanted to be friends with her. So we started going to the gym, and in the gym that I was at in particular, it was, trainers always coming up to you. "Hey, do you want a free training session? Hey, we're doing like a free body composition, this and that." And I did all of those things. And, it was like a slow drip into me of like more working out. Oh, like calories. I need to be more conscious of my protein. Oh, the things that I'm eating aren't healthy. And I would just get little comments here and there. I remember my coworker was like, "Wow, I can't believe you eat cheese and crackers. Like, that's a lot of cheese." And I would be like, like this receiving the message that maybe I shouldn't be eating that much cheese. So all of that basically snowballed into me being hyper fixated on food and exercise, till eventually I was like, "Oh, I can't work here anymore because I'm thinking about food and exercise and nutrition all day. That should be my job." So that at that point, I was like also having a similar feeling of just confusion and overwhelm. I considered becoming a chef. I considered moving to a farm. I considered being a food journalist. I considered being a dietitian. My parents were like, "Interview all these people and see what their jobs are like." Ultimately decided, well, registered dietitian is the most stable. Like that is the path I can see and I can take. So I quit that job and was going back to school nights and weekends, going to community college, taking all the prereqs because I majored in religious studies and Spanish. So I didn't have any science to go back to fall back on to get into a grad program. And I think that is a very common pipeline, the disordered eating, nutrition, and exercise obsession to dietitian pipeline. And it wasn't until the end of grad school that I started realizing, maybe all of this rigidity is not the way forward. And then eventually when I worked in LA in my internship, which is like the post-grad residency for dietitians, it just didn't make sense to me giving people all of these nutrition recommendations when there were so many other systemic issues at play. I feel like I'm rambling a lot now, but basically it was a personal journey of coming from a place of a hyperfixation on health to now I help people find their definition of health and peace with food and their body, because I've been there and I know what it's like to feel rigid and obsessive over it. And I believe that we can all reach a more balanced way in the middle.
Okay, so you were very hyper fixated on your health, on food, and that led you to say, okay, I want to become a registered dietitian. It sounds like, based on what you're saying and some of the knowledge that I happen to have from some of my wife's experiences, it sounds like why you pursued becoming a registered dietitian in the first place and the kind of work or approach that you are taking now are different. Is that true?
Yes, 1,000%. I basically wrote my grad school admissions essay on how I figured it out. I was unhealthy. I ate too many Doritos. And then I went to the gym and I learned about which foods were healthy. And I started working out and, eating differently. And I lost weight. And now I want to help people do the same. Like, oh, so easy peasy. It's like embarrassing now for me to look back at it because I had very rose colored glasses on around nutrition education. I would go into lower income communities of color and make salads for people. Essentially, I did a lot of volunteering. And I thought I was doing amazing work. I really felt like I was making a huge difference, and I just didn't know a lot about the social determinants of health and the systemic factors at play. And I didn't recognize the cultural insensitivity at play. So now my approach is totally different. And it was a much younger version of myself.
You use the word embarrassing. I mean, as you look back on that version of you and that paper that you wrote, and as you were going through that grad school program, I mean, what is your relationship with that past version of you? Is there, you said maybe embarrassing. I mean, is there an element though of, if that past version of you didn't exist, would we have the Rebecca that we have today?
That's a beautiful way to put it. Absolutely not. We would not have the Rebecca that we have today. I think I really believe that so much of my journey was meant to lead me to my current situation. And here's why. If I hadn't become a dietitian in that way, then I never would have gotten the opportunity to then work where I worked. I never would have been connected to my therapist, who was like a therapist that my previous boss recommended to everyone. I never would have gotten the opportunity to work at a trauma treatment center, which never would, and then I wouldn't have been awoken to my own PTSD, which meant that I would never have processed my, maybe, who knows, but my own feelings around my personal health journey and also my journey as an adopted person. And we can just keep going. Like all of these things, I made all of these connections because I was a dietitian, because I then entered the eating disorder field and the field of mental health, which helped me heal my own mental health struggles. And I just feel like a totally different person. And so I do have a lot of compassion for that younger Rebecca, because she didn't know anything, right? Like she didn't know, and she was being shaped by the community in her life and by the organizations in New York City. And everyone was just talking about how great it was. And I think that's the piece, right? Like when you go on a health journey, it was like, wow, you're so healthy. You exercise so much. That's so wonderful. You're getting smaller. You look wonderful. Like people were just heaping praise on me. And that became what I was known for being the health nut runner who wakes up at 5 a.m. and, just all of those things. And it felt really good to be seen and accepted in that way. Until it didn't.
How does it feel to sort of reflect on some of these previous versions of yourself and just go through that exercise of thinking about how it's brought you to where you are now?
Yeah, I feel gratitude because now I can speak about it, going back to our, earlier talk about using your voice. When I first started reflecting on these previous versions of myself, I was very ashamed that is how I got into this field and that I didn't even know it at the time. Now I think my story is just so common and not that remarkable, but in a good way. It helps me connect with my clients, and there's no way that I would have known that my relationship with food was problematic back then unless I had this version of myself to compare it to, because it just feels so different. So I'm grateful, because I don't ever want to go back there.
Yeah. Okay. So describe for us what about your relationship with food was in your mind problematic? Because to most people listening to this conversation, and you hear, okay, you were going to the gym all the time, you were eating all of these healthy foods, and you were getting up and you were running. I think to the common person, we would say, well, that's great. That seems excellent. That's wonderful. How could that be problematic? So walk us through what about it was problematic.
Yes, that is. Yeah, it's funny to listen to because most people would just be like, great, like you're doing so well. You're taking care of yourself. It was problematic in my mind because I thought about nutrition and exercise all the time, either what I was going to eat or what I had just eaten. And it resulted in some strange behaviors that most people wouldn't look at as strange, but I realize now because I feel differently. One, my food shows were my thing. I was always watching Food Network or scrolling Instagram, when people would make those Instagram videos of like the craziest mozzarella, like things that I wouldn't allow myself to eat, but just watching like huge appetizers and desserts. And I would walk around the grocery store for fun. Like that was one of my hobbies. I would say like, oh, I love going to the grocery store at midnight. There's nobody there. You can just walk around and look at all the food. I mean, that's not normal. Even though my body was the smallest it had ever been and I was the most fit I had ever been, I was still deeply, deeply insecure about my body and would still cry about different parts of myself that I felt were too big, and take pictures of myself in the mirror, which, flexing and whatever. And that the funny thing is like that was encouraged. Like I was doing different types of workout programs where they would be like, measure all the different parts of your body and make sure you're taking progress photos so you can see the changes. But, it became very restrictive for me. I went from being vegetarian to then paleo vegetarian to then vegan. And I have this one memory of being in Los Angeles with my now husband. I lived here for a summer to sort of see how I would like it. And I was on a very regimented eating plan. We were going to a party. And so I knew I didn't know what we were going to eat at the party. So my eating plan had basically a treat meal, which was a peanut butter and jelly sandwich on Ezekiel bread. And before we went to the party, I was like, I want to grab a coffee. So I grabbed a coffee and I was so excited to pull out my little sandwich. And I remember sitting on the curb and eating it, being like, oh, okay, like my sandwich. Like if I made that sandwich now, it would just be a normal Tuesday, would not be anything special. Like that bread is not anything special, but my relationship with food was so warped and it wasn't joyful or easeful or flexible. And that's how I am now. I don't ruminate about food. The grocery store is not my favorite place. Food Network shows are not my favorite shows. Like when you're not obsessed with food, I now have space in my brain for all the other things in the world.
So it sounds, I think of this word obsession, and it sounds like that was sort of one of the problematic things was that you were obsessing over food, you were obsessing over your body. That was your life, was thinking about these things, going to the grocery store, watching food shows, and there's more to life than food in our bodies, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it was just reinforced by the fact that I was studying to be a dietitian and trying to get into a grad school program to major in nutrition. So all my schoolwork was revolving around that, plus all my hobbies, plus all my friends. So it was a cycle because the fitness group that I was in, I made friends there and then we'd hang out together. And then the majority of our social activities would revolve around running, exercising, or drinking, or usually running and then drinking. Like it just, now that like, now I cook things that I am excited to try, and I do movement to sustain my body and to take care of my body, and I don't push myself to my limits. I think it's very different than it was before.
Did you at that time, did you feel like the behaviors and the different things that you were doing, some of this obsession over food, over your body, did you feel like it was problematic at that time? Or is this, as you're looking back now, you can recognize?
No, I never, ever, ever felt that it was problematic. Everyone encouraged me. I think the other part of it is because a lot of this stuff in my head, I didn't share with people. Well, I didn't share with everyone. I did share with some friends who also encouraged it because they also had similar relationships with food. So it was just normal for me to be texting people about, oh, I'm so sick of eating the same breakfast every day. I don't know what to eat for lunch. I'm worried I didn't have enough protein. Then to get the same answers back, like, yeah, we have to make sure we work out and that kind of thing. But I had no idea it was problematic. It wasn't until I started working in the eating disorder field, people started asking me, well, did you have an eating disorder? And I would say no. And once again, I felt like that made me inadequate to help people. I would be trying to figure out how to not answer the question because I didn't want them to know that I didn't understand. I felt like I didn't understand their struggle because I never had an eating disorder. But then we would be talking about all the different signs and symptoms and behaviors. And I remember one time my therapist asked me to reflect on it. And I wrote down all of the things that I used to do. And I said to myself, if someone came into my office with this presentation, what would I say? And I was just like, oh, damn. It was like a light bulb moment for me that I just had never considered myself in that way because I wasn't sick enough. I didn't have any medical complications. I didn't reach a weight that, landed me in a treatment program or in the hospital. So I wasn't taking my story seriously, but it wasn't until I took a step back and looked at it from an outsider's lens that all of my struggles were so similar to the people that I was treating. So I started to reframe my story.
How did that feel to see some of those, the actions that you would take, and to list all of those out and to see and say, oh, wow, I would describe someone like this as someone who had a disordered eating history. How did it feel to see yourself in that way for maybe the first time?
Terrifying. It was terrifying. The first things I felt were that I was dumb, that I was stupid for considering myself to be a very smart person and to be studying nutrition for so many years and not even see the signs in my own lived experience, even though that is like a hallmark of eating disorders. I felt embarrassed because I feel like having self-awareness in this field is really important. And for me not to have the self-awareness to even understand my own past felt like it made me feel inadequate. And then there was this other layer of, well, oh my gosh, how am I going to talk about this? If I say I had an eating disorder, people might be curious, well, did you do what you're supposed to do? Go see a therapist, get a dietitian, go to treatment. And then I'm going to say, no, I didn't do any of those things. And I didn't do it the right way. And how are they going to receive that? Are they going to take me seriously? Once again, like all of these thoughts about what other people might perceive, the story they might tell in their head, or feeling like maybe people are going to think that my healing isn't good enough because I didn't do any of the traditional things that you're supposed to do. That was a couple years ago now, so I feel much more confident in all of that. And I feel very confident in being able to say, like, I know myself better than anybody else. I have an excellent relationship with food, and I know when my brain is traveling back to that place, and I know what to do if that happens. Yeah, I feel confident in that.
What do you do when your brain takes you back to that place?
Number one, I don't hide it. I don't not talk about it. So, I will tell my therapist, or start journaling about it. Early on, like a couple of years ago when I was struggling a lot more, I used some of the same tools that I teach my clients, which is starting to do more self-monitoring, basically like using apps or logs to start kind of tracking what I'm eating, and engaging in what's called mechanical eating, which is like when you eat on a schedule, even if you're not feeling hungry. Because for me, what I was struggling with was more like restriction behaviors from my trauma symptoms coming up. And just leaning on my support system. So asking for help, saying like, hey, like to my husband, like, can you make me lunch, or can you remind me to eat, or that kind of thing.
How does it feel as we sit here in this conversation to be sharing these parts of your story and using your voice, sharing the things that you were at one time terrified or embarrassed to share about your story? How does it feel to be now sharing those and embracing those parts of you?
It's important, and it's a big sign of growth and healing for me, because I feel okay in my body sharing these things. My voice isn't shaking. My heart isn't racing. I'm not nervous right now about what you're going to think of me. It's just all these little moments and experiences, and I could even call them exposures of practicing. What is it like to tell Chad, a stranger, these parts of myself? It just takes practice. And I feel really happy that I'm in a place where I can talk about this, because at one point could barely even write it down in my journal.
Well, I really commend you, because again, for people listening, as of 40 minutes ago when we started this recording, well, actually it was before that because we had some technical problems, but as of, let's call it an hour and a half ago, Rebecca and I did not know each other at all. We had never chatted. We had never met face to face, virtually. So I appreciate and recognize that you are sharing this with me here now, and you're sharing this with whoever is listening to this conversation after the fact. And that's a lot of growth, whatever it is about our story, about our experiences that at one time we were ashamed of, embarrassed of, didn't want to share. As you said, to be able to now do it, and do it in a way that your voice isn't shaking, and you have some level of, it seems like, peace with your story and your experiences. I just want to take a moment to recognize that growth. And I think that is really, 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 really cool, and really, really special that you have gone through this experience and you can be here now with me. So I just want to recognize that and say thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity. It's one of the reasons why I really wanted to have more podcast experiences, because each time it gets a little bit easier, and my comfort zone is writing for myself, not sharing it with any other people. But when I meet people and connect with them, I feel like I do that better face to face and not in my writing, which, it's just my perception at the moment. So yeah, it is very special.
Hey, cheers to growth. I love that. So, okay, let's revisit now. I want to understand. So you left this role that you were in a few years ago, and let's walk back to, you had this opportunity to now choose your path, choose your own adventure. And you could choose the way in which you wanted to structure things. You could choose the way you wanted to structure your business. You could choose the way you wanted to work with the clients that you were working with and the ways in which you were going to help them. So what did you decide to do?
Well, first I took a break and just rested for a couple of months, which was very, very challenging. Felt like the world was leaving me behind. But then I slowly took the steps to begin my own private practice, which also was very, very scary for me because I had always said, I never want to own my own business. I don't want a private practice. I don't want to work for myself. My sweet spot is working with clients and counseling, all of the other things, marketing, selling, finances. I don't have interest in that. And we don't get training in that. So I really had to start from the very beginning and learn a lot of things that I had no experience in. And I think I struggle with being a beginner. It's very hard for me. I feel better when I know something, when I feel like I know something. So I decided to start, by reaching out to a couple of my previous clients that I had left at the other practice and seeing if anyone wanted to continue services with me. And then I started to build up an Instagram presence and do some in-person marketing, getting coffee with different dietitians and therapists and recovery coaches in my local area, being active on Facebook groups. And I started to get a couple of clients. And it was very scary to me because in my body, I was really worried when someone would book a discovery call. I was like, oh my gosh, like what if this person becomes a client and then I have to see them? And then I would have that moment that like we just talked about, like, no, I get to do this. This is my choice. I don't have to do any of this. I think it was my body remembering what it felt like in my previous role to not have control over my schedule, to be seeing 6 or 7 clients a day, to never know when an open spot was going to be booked with somebody else, to never know what was coming. So I did have to keep quite a lot of control in the beginning, because that was all I had the bandwidth for. And then sometime last summer, I just started feeling like maybe I should do something creative too, because client work I didn't have as many clients as I had wanted. And I also was feeling this calling towards my creative side. So I started researching how to start an Etsy store, how to, draw, how to use Procreate, how to make your own stickers, how to use print on demand. And I started an Etsy shop, and that was really fun. And it's not as much of a focus as it was for me last summer, but now I have a balance between seeing clients and working on the Etsy store when I want to. I also do some virtual assistant work, and the flexibility that I have in my life is the greatest gift of anything ever. I can't even imagine going back to a 9-to-5.
I think that's really cool. I mean, many parts of my story mirror elements of what you just shared. And, it is fun. I think I find it fun where we live in this day and age where we don't have to work full time doing one thing all the time. We can make a career and an income and a lifestyle and all these things out of a myriad of different things.
Mm-hmm.
We can have client work. I have this podcast, which doesn't produce any income. Well, very minimal, more of a hobby, but it's fun and I enjoy it. But it's, to me, I value flexibility. I value freedom. I value and enjoy living in a time where we can create these days and these weeks in the ways that we want them to look and feel. And it's fun hearing stories of how other people have gone about creating something similar in their life. So I think what you're doing is really awesome. I think it's cool to explore some of our different creativity and passions, just kind of see what else is out there. We don't have to pigeonhole ourselves into doing one thing and operating in one lane. And it sounds like you're enjoying having some of those different avenues in your life as well.
1000%. And it sounds like you went through this experience also. So much of it has been about deconstructing the mainstream narrative of what it looks like to be a successful person, and also trying to detach myself from the belief that having a steady paycheck is a measure of how worthy I am as a human. Obviously, I need enough money to live and survive and hopefully thrive, but it is really, really difficult to unlearn some of those narratives, and also to unlearn the things that I was taught in my previous job about work-life balance, because my previous supervisor was very strict in, how much communication you're supposed to have with your clients and when you should be working or not working, that I would hear those voices in my head of like, well, you shouldn't be moving this session around. They need to learn structure. Or you shouldn't be working on a Saturday. You should be fitting your work time into Monday through Friday. Or, don't email them too much because they're going to come to rely on it or whatever. It just like, what? Like, I just realized like, when her voice would pop into my head, I'm just like, no. I can do what I want to do. And if I want to text them every single day to check in and see how they're doing, the work police aren't coming to arrest me. But like, I've always been I've always been a rule follower, and it's very hard for me to, step out of that. So even when felt like I was breaking a rule, that I didn't even work there anymore, but I think it's just been fun to see how you grow and learn when the structure just totally falls away and you are in charge of you.
I feel that it's pushed a lot of those same buttons for me, and rubbed up against a lot of previous operating beliefs that I had around how work was supposed to look and how I was supposed to interact with clients and how I was supposed to carry myself and show up. And I've done a ton of unlearning as well. And it just goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning around the idea of thinking for ourselves and deciding for ourselves and having that autonomy, and that, we get to decide what we want our days to look like and how we want to show up and how we want to interact with our clients. And we can create all of those rules. There's no rules of how everyone on earth has to approach this thing. Mm-hmm. Not that makes it easy, because I still have a difficult time thinking for myself and deciding for myself. But I appreciate the reminder. I appreciate this conversation. It always, just brings me back to thinking about, in what ways am I still trying to fulfill some societal norm or societal belief as opposed to the way that I want to approach something? Do you find yourself still butting up against that a little bit too?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to ask you, like, do you recognize other people's voices and messages in your head?
For sure. There are often specific people that I can think of exactly what they would say in a certain environment. Some of them happen to be, bosses or previous managers that led me to believe a certain thing about, work and how life should be. So yes, I can picture very specific people saying very specific things. And, it goes back to, at one time, that thing might have been helpful, and it might have helped me professionally or personally navigate certain parts of my career, or, reach a certain point or milestone. So at one point it might have helped. I guess it feels like growth to be able to then recognize, but now it doesn't feel like it's helping me. And now I want to make a decision that I want to do this differently. And it's so kind of that, idea of accepting that I don't know if I have to be, disappointed in that previous version that maybe benefited in some way from some way of thinking. And now I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to change my mind. And, I think as human beings, we're allowed to do that. We get new information, we get new experiences, and what the heck, we can change our minds.
Yes. One of my favorite things to guide myself and my clients is that all of this is an experiment. So we're just experimenting with the way something feels in any given moment on any given day. I definitely struggle with catastrophizing. Or I would say maybe it's more future tripping, which means like if I make a decision today or if I feel one way today, I'm really worried about the implications that's going to have in like 6 months or 1 year. But I might not feel that way in 6 months or 1 year, but sometimes I feel very overwhelmed by my in the moment feelings because it's not as familiar to me to recognize what I want or need or feel, and then to honor that as important information. So I get overwhelmed by it. Like, how am I gonna, what if I can't? Like, and I just start to short circuit. So that's why I feel like it's a safety zone for me to rely on what other people think or believe. You know, my previous supervisor, I used to write down what she would say to me in our supervision meetings verbatim. And sometimes I would just repeat it to the client. So it wasn't my words at all. It was her words. But that felt like, okay, I respect her. She's been doing this longer than me. She knows what she's doing. I'll just say her words. So yeah, it can be very scary stepping into your own power and realizing like, yeah, well, you can play around with your words and see what happens.
I love that phrase. It can be scary stepping into your own power. I think that's one of the things that often limits us the most is whatever, that quote is. It's not the things that we are afraid we can't do. It's the things that we are afraid that we can do. And when we start showing up as ourselves and in our own way, it's scary. It's scary. And then, as you said, I think, but we do it and we get small evidence of the fact that, oh, I did it and I'm okay. I'm okay. Maybe I could try it again, and maybe I could try it again. And then all of a sudden, here we are on a podcast talking about it. As we wrap up our conversation, I want to ask you operate under the name No Strings Nutrition, and tell me about what that means. Why that name now?
Mm-hmm. I wanted to name my business something that was playful, not super serious, that represented flexibility. I think a lot of people perceive dietitians as the food police or having a specific agenda. Even in the eating disorder community, I would say that there is a conversation around what healing or recovery should look like and the path that a person should take to get there. I wanted people to know that with me, there's no strings attached. There's nothing sneaky or subversive that I'm trying to do. It's no strings nutrition. It's whatever you want your relationship with food and your body to be. I will honor that, of course, with my wisdom and my education, but ultimately I work for my clients in helping them connect more deeply with their values and their life and what they want. So I view myself more as a guide for that work, coming alongside them. And there's just no strings attached. Yes, I have skin in the game. Yes, I care deeply about every person, but I'm not trying to change anybody or push them in any one direction, which is very frustrating for a lot of people because they want to show up. They want to show up and for me to tell them what to do. And sometimes I will give more concrete guidance and we'll talk about something structured, but ultimately the goal is for them to be listening to their own inner voice and their own knowing rather than my voice, which is a longer process because when you've struggled with relationship with food, the voice that you have might not be the healthiest. It might not be the one that serves you in the long term. It might not be connected to your values. So it's okay if people borrow my voice for a while and borrow my experience. But at the end of the day, no strings attached. It's your life. I want you to find your path.
I like that idea of borrowing until they discover it for themselves. I think that makes sense to me as far as the ways in which we just as humans grow and develop is that sometimes we borrow someone else's verbiage or ideas or concepts, and then we experience it a little bit ourselves, and then we craft it into our own. And I'm with you in that. Ultimately, I think that's how we learn and operate best as humans. Is we've got to embody it ourselves and figure out what it means for us. So thank you for sharing your story with us. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. Thank you for your patience in all of our technical difficulties. Rebecca, if people wanted to find you online or connect with you, what would be the best ways for them to do that?
Yes, my website is www.nostringsnutrition.com, and you can find me on Instagram at no.strings.nutrition. Those are the best two ways. I'm pretty active on there. And you can book a call with me if you're curious about nutrition counseling directly through my website. And you can find my merch and my food-related products on Etsy under the same name. My shop name is No Strings Nutrition.
Awesome.
Thank you, Chad.
Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for your calm and reassuring presence.
Well, my friend, I got to tell you, after this episode, I was so inspired, I went out and got a tattoo. I'm kidding. I didn't really do that, although it's made me reconsider it. And that part of the conversation was just fun because it felt very real to me. It solidified or made concrete some of these ideas around fearing other people's judgment or what they're going to think, making decisions for yourself, having that level of autonomy in our own lives. The tattoo thing is a big one for me. I still haven't overcome some of those thoughts and feelings, and I can't overcome the permanence of it. So I don't have one yet. TBD. We'll see what happens. One of my favorite parts of this conversation, the idea of unlearning. I think I resonated a lot with that portion of the conversation because it feels like I've been in an unlearning phase of my life for the last maybe 2 or 3 years, where I'm challenging, reconsidering, unlearning some of the things that I've held as truths or believed to be true about myself or about how I'm supposed to go about living and experiencing life. And it's hard. I mean, breaking down and sort of accepting that maybe some of the ways that I've approached things previously or some of the beliefs that I've had, maybe they weren't serving me or aren't continuing to serve me in a way that they once did. And I'm finding that it's difficult to let go of. And it's also empowering to think that we can make some changes. We can learn new things. We can unlearn these things about ourselves, about life, and we can welcome in new things that are going to better serve us into the future. And as I recently just turned 30 years old, I'm entering a new decade. I'm bringing that mindset with me of like, you know what? I can continue to evolve into the person that I want to be. I can continue to make the decisions that I want to make. I can unlearn things and learn new things, and that can be an ever-evolving process. And I really like that about this conversation. I hope you did too. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Rebecca. If you did, I would ask you to take a moment to do 2 things. Number 1, if you'd be willing to leave a 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening on, it just helps kind of build the credibility of the show. I would appreciate that. It takes maybe 30 seconds to do. Number 2, if you found value in the conversation, is there someone else in your life who you think might also value this conversation? A simple text message or email would be great to share the conversation with them. Sharing friend to friend is one of the best ways that we can grow this show together, and I would appreciate that because I think that the world can benefit from more meaningful conversations like the ones that we have here. And if you're here and you've made it to this point, I've got to believe you probably feel that way too. All right, thanks for investing your time with me today, and I'll see you next time.